The moment my husband's sister slid the folder across the table, I knew I had not been invited to dinner to celebrate anything. I had been invited to witness my own replacement. It was one of those polished family nights that looked perfect from the outside. Candlelight, heavy plates, expensive wine breathing on the sideboard. His mother had brought out the gold-rimmed serving dishes she only used when she wanted the room to feel important. That should have warned me. In Daniel's family, nothing got dressed up unless there was an audience for it. His mother, Celeste, sat at the head of the table in a cream silk blouse and enough diamonds to make grief look profitable. His younger sister, Ava, kept smiling at me, the way people smile at a dog. Right before they bring out a leash, Daniel sat beside me with one hand resting on my chair, warm, casual, practiced, like the husband he had spent 4 years pretending to be. The whole room felt rehearsed, not loud, not tense, just arranged like everybody had gotten the same script. Except me. Ava pushed the folder another inch across the table until it stopped beside my wine glass. "You don't have to look so scared," she said. "It's not a subpoena." Celeste gave her a warning glance. That wasn't really a warning. Then she looked at me and softened her voice into that polished gentleness she used whenever she wanted to say something ugly. In an elegant way. "Nora, sweetheart, no one is attacking you. We're trying to include you." Include me? That word landed wrong. I looked down at the folder, but didn't touch it. Thick cream paper, my name typed on a tab. Clean, prepared, final. Daniel reached for his water, not looking at me when he said, "Just hear them out." That was the first crack. Not because he agreed with them. Daniel always agreed with whoever let him stay comfortable. It was the wording, not hear us out. Hear them out. Like he had already stepped half an inch away from me. Like he wanted distance. Before impact, I sat back in my chair and folded my hands in my lap. "Okay." I said, "I'm listening." Ava brightened immediately. "You know the commercial property deal I've been putting together?" she asked. I did know, or at least, I knew the version of it they had been repeating for months. Boutique redevelopment. Mixed-use retail. Historic district. Strategic investors. Every time Ava talked about it, the details changed. But the confidence never did. Daniel had been especially enthusiastic lately. Too enthusiastic. In hindsight, Ava tapped the folder. "This is just the final operating agreement. We cleaned it up this week. We had legal go through everything. It's simple. No real investor says it's simple. When handing you legal documents over roasted salmon," I still didn't touch it. Celeste lifted her glass, but didn't drink. "Ava has worked very hard on this. And Daniel told us you wanted to be more involved in family decisions." I turned to my husband. He smiled like he was trying to keep a child calm on an airplane. "I said you wanted transparency." I looked back at the folder. "And where exactly do I come in?" Ava answered too quickly. "You're not funding anything outright. If that's what you're worried about, if that one word told me funding was exactly what this was about." She opened the folder herself and turned it so the pages faced me. Signature lines, entity charts, a property map, numbers arranged in neat columns, meant to overwhelm. Before they informed, then I saw it, my full legal name, printed under a heading that made the air leave my lungs. Personal guarantor. For a second, I thought I was reading it wrong. I'm a compliance officer for a private healthcare network. I spend my days reading contracts, audit language, liability structure, and indemnification clause. I know what words mean when rich people try to hide teeth inside them, and that word had teeth. I didn't reach for the paper. I just heard my own voice go flat. Why is my name on this? Ava's smile flickered, but recovered. It's standard. No? I said, it isn't. Daniel finally looked at me. Nora? No. Don't Nora me. I kept my eyes on the page. Why is my name listed as guarantor? On a property deal your sister is supposedly leading? Celeste set her glass down, very carefully, because banks like stability. The room went still, not because of what she said, because of how fast she said it. Ava leaned forward, palms open, voice soothing now. It's not a big deal. The lender just wanted stronger backing on paper. Until the first tenants are secured, Daniel explained that your income profile and credit history would make the paperwork smoother. I turned to him slowly. He gave me that tired expression men wear when they've decided a woman's reaction is the real inconvenience. It's temporary. He said, it's just to get the deal closed. Did you tell them I agreed to this? His jaw tightened. I told them you'd understand it. I looked back down at the page and started reading for real. The guarantee wasn't symbolic. It wasn't ceremonial. It attached me directly to the debt structure. If the property failed, if the LLC folded, if the project went sideways, my income, my assets, and my future earning power could all be dragged into their collapse. Daniel knew that meant this wasn't a family dinner. It was a conversion attempt. Get me seated. Get me softened. Get the pressure distributed around the table. Wrap liability in language like support, partnership, belief. I closed the folder. No. Ava laughed once. Sharp. Disbelieving. You didn't even finish reading it. I read enough. Celeste's expression chilled. Nora. Families don't succeed by hoarding. There it was. Not concern, not opportunity. The accusation, underneath the silk. Daniel leaned in, lowering his voice, as if privacy would make betrayal feel kinder. Can we not do this? In front of everyone? Everyone. His mother, his sister, the couple from the club. Apparently, this little dinner had a witness list. I turned to him. Do what? Refuse to sign away liability for a deal no one discussed with me. Before printing my name into it, his eyes hardened. I'm asking you not to make this ugly. Not sign, not agree, not understand. Just don't embarrass us while we corner you. I pushed my chair back and stood. Ava let out an incredulous breath. Celeste told me to sit down. I picked up the folder and smiled at her. For the first time all night, I said, is exactly what worries me. Then I walked out of the dining room and went straight into Daniel's study. I shut the door, set the folder on his desk, and photographed every page with my phone. Then I searched the company name on the draft agreement. The LLC had been amended 6 days earlier. New financing language. New exposure terms. New debt obligations. And then I found something that made the back of my neck go cold. A prior filing. Signed acknowledgement. With my name on it. Not a typed placeholder. Not draft language. A completed digital consent attached to the financing packet from 3 days earlier. There was a timestamp. There was my email listed. There was an electronic signature authorization I had never given. For a long second, the whole night rearranged itself in my head. Daniel insisting on updating our shared cloud backups last weekend. Daniel asking where my old laptop was. Daniel mentioning that my phone kept dropping verification codes, and I should probably turn off extra security prompts because they were annoying. I felt it then, not heartbreak, not even rage. Recognition. Cold. Preciso. Immediate. I had not married a weak man who got pushed around by his family. I had married a man who had been building an exit through my name. And judging by the paperwork in front of me, tonight was supposed to be the night I made it legal. I picked up my phone, looked at the locked study door, and realized something with terrifying calm. By the time dessert hit that table, I wasn't going to be the woman they brought in to absorb the risk. I was going to be the woman who burned their version of the story to the ground. I stood in Daniel's study, with the monitor reflecting off framed photos on the shelf, vacation pictures, Christmases, one black and white shot from our wedding where he was looking at me like I had just walked into his life and made it better. For a second, I let myself look at that one. It's a dangerous thing. Nostalgia. It can make evidence feel rude. I forced my eyes back to the screen. The filing was real. The digital authorization was real. The timing was real. And no matter how carefully I tried to explain it away, one fact sat in the center of it, like a steel beam. Daniel had already used my name before he ever asked for my permission, which meant dinner had never been a conversation. It had been cleanup. I took screenshots, emailed them to a private address I used for overflow records, and started checking everything else. That's the part people never understand about betrayal. They think the moment you find out is the moment the betrayal begins. It isn't. The finding out is just when the fog lifts. The betrayal has usually been living in the walls for a while. As I pulled up our shared cloud activity, the last 2 years of my marriage started rearranging themselves into something uglier and far more coherent. Daniel and I met at a fundraising dinner downtown 4 years earlier. He was easy to like in the way some men train themselves to be. He listened without interrupting. He remembered details. He had that warm, slightly tired face that made women think he carried more than he complained about. At the time, I was 32, overseeing regulatory risk for a healthcare group that had expanded too fast and needed adults in the room. I was good at seeing where systems broke. What I was not good at, apparently, was spotting a broken man who knew how to present as kind. Daniel performed peace beautifully. He sent flowers to my office for no reason. He learned my coffee order. He never made me feel guilty for working late when I apologized for being unavailable during quarter close. He'd smile and say, "I like women with real lives." That line worked on me for a long time. Looking back, what I thought was admiration was mostly observation. He was learning the edges of me. The first year of our marriage was clean enough that if someone had asked me then whether I trusted him, I would have answered too quickly. We moved into the house I had bought before the wedding. Daniel never seemed threatened that it was mine first. At least not openly. He said all the right things, called it our home in public, told people he was proud of me, kissed my forehead when I worked from the kitchen island, with spreadsheets open. If there were cracks back then, they were hairline, tiny things. The way he was always between projects, when shared expenses came up, the way Celeste praised me in the exact tone people use when complimenting a useful appliance. The way Ava never asked what I thought, only what I was doing, and whether it was crazy stressful. Being responsible for so much money and compliance, I registered all of it. I just didn't classify it correctly. That's the problem when you're highly functional. People assume you're hard to exploit. Sometimes you're easier to exploit because your threshold for carrying weight is so high. The first time Daniel asked me to just look over something for Ava, it was a lease issue on a short-term retail space she wanted for a pop-up. She showed up with pastries, sat at my kitchen counter, and made it sound casual. I scanned the paperwork in 10 minutes and told her exactly where the liability was buried. A month later, Celeste told people at brunch that Ava had nearly made a terrible mistake until Nora saved her. Everyone laughed. Daniel squeezed my knee under the table, like I was supposed to enjoy being useful. Then it happened again. A vendor dispute, a licensing question, insurance language, a lender wanting just a little more verification. Every time, it came dressed as temporary, informal, harmless, family. I told myself it was normal. I was wrong. What they were doing was testing access, testing my response time, testing my willingness, testing how much of my expertise, income profile, and professional credibility they could route through the system. Before I stopped calling it help, Daniel was always the bridge. Never the demander, never the aggressor. That was what made him dangerous. He specialized in emotional insulation. Ava would ask for something unreasonable. Celeste would add pressure, and Daniel would step in at the end, not to protect me, to translate the demand into something softer. Something that sounded like love, support, partnership, family, peace. He didn't create the appetite, he just made sure I swallowed it. I opened the cloud logs and felt my stomach tighten. There had been repeated access attempts on old financial folders over the past 6 months. Nothing flashy, just enough to look like administrative noise. If you weren't trained to notice patterns, Several were tied to a device ID I recognized immediately. Daniel's tablet. I checked my inbox next. There were archived lender emails I had never seen because they had been redirected through a rules filter buried in settings I hadn't touched. Subject lines about updated terms, revised guarantor framework, supplemental borrower disclosures. Not only had Daniel used my information, he had been managing the visibility of the process. That was the moment my marriage stopped feeling wounded and started feeling engineered. I thought back to small conversations I had ignored because they didn't seem important. At the time, Daniel asking one night if I'd ever considered consolidating certain assets for simplicity. Daniel pushing me to let him handle routine mail because I was too busy to sort junk. Daniel becoming weirdly curious about which of my accounts required two-factor authentication and which still allowed backup device approval. He wasn't learning my life. He was mapping it. A soft knock landed against the study door. Nora? Daniel's voice, gentle, controlled, cautious. I stayed silent. Nora. Open the door. I got close enough to hear what was underneath his voice. You should come back to the table, he said. Everyone's uncomfortable. Everyone. Always everyone. Never me. I leaned against the wood. Did you use my name before tonight? Silence. Then, it's more complicated than that. That was enough. I stepped back, opened one of his desk drawers, and found a thin accordion file I had never seen before. Property sketches, lender notes, printed email chains, debt projections, and on one yellow sticky note in Daniel's handwriting. If Nora hesitates, frame as temporary bridge until refinance. Celeste can handle chung. For a second, the room went hollow. There it was. Not misunderstanding. Not family overreach. All plan. Ava as the eager dreamer. Celeste as pressure. Daniel as emotional access point. And me, I was the bridge. The clean name, the stable income, the competent wife whose signature could turn amateur ambition into bankable legitimacy. My pulse slowed. Emotion stops trying to bargain with reality. Once the truth becomes undeniable, the knock came again, sharper this time. Nora. I put the sticky note in my pocket, photographed every page in the file, and took the backup drive too. Then I opened the door. Daniel stood in the hall, with one hand braced on the frame, sleeves rolled, face arranged into concern. If someone had walked by, they would have thought he was checking on an overwhelmed wife. After a tense misunderstanding, he looked over my shoulder toward the desk. You've made your point, he said quietly. My point? You're upset. I studied him. This was the man I had slept beside for 4 years. The man whose shirts I had folded. The man who once sat with me in urgent care for 3 hours and held my purse on his lap like it mattered. That's what makes betrayal so disorienting. Cruel people are rarely cruel all the time. If they were, nobody would stay. They already submitted digital consent under my name. I said, 3 days ago, something moved in his eyes. Then, not guilt, calculation. It's reversible, he said. If you're going to be dramatic, at least understand that dramatic. I nodded once. Who has access to my authorization records? He shifted. Nora. Who? Ava's attorney handled filing. There was a filing path. There was enough confidence to move before I ever saw the documents. This hadn't been impulsive. It had structure. Celeste appeared at the end of the hallway then, one manicured hand resting lightly on the banister. I think this has gone far enough, she said. No one is stealing from you. We are trying to build something that benefits the family. I looked at her. Then at Daniel. There are moments when a whole emotional architecture collapses at once. Love, I hope, denial, loyalty, gone together. Like a hotel losing power, floor by floor. Standing there in that hallway, I understood the actual shape of my marriage. I had never been brought into a family. I had been absorbed into an operation. Celeste took a few steps closer. Come back to the table. Nora. Eat dessert. Sleep on it. There is no reason to make permanent decisions because of one emotional evening. Anyone who says there's no reason to make permanent decisions is usually standing in the middle of the reason. I gave her the smallest smile of my life. You're right. I said. Relief flickered across Daniel's face. I'm not making any decisions tonight. That wasn't forgiveness. That was strategy. I walked to the powder room, locked myself inside, and sent 3 emails, one to my attorney, asking for an urgent call in the morning, one to a forensic technology consultant I knew through work, and one to myself with the subject line, do not confront, document everything. Then I looked at my reflection. Same black dress, same pearl studs, same face, but not the same woman. When I walked back toward the dining room, I understood 2 things with absolute clarity. First, Daniel and his family still believed this was a pressure problem, a mood problem, a management problem. Second, they still had no idea what kind of woman they had actually chosen. I took my seat, folded my napkin across my lap, and smiled, like I had finally come to my senses. If they wanted me calm, I could be calm. If they wanted me quiet, I could be quiet. What they didn't understand yet was that the moment I stopped arguing, it was the moment I started building the case. Dinner after that felt almost peaceful. That was the disturbing part. Not because the tension disappeared. It just changed shape. Daniel's family thought they had forced the evening back under control. And people are always gentler. Once they think resistance has passed, Ava stopped pushing the folder. Celeste switched to stories about a charity gala. Daniel touched my wrist, once under the table, testing the atmosphere, and when I didn't pull away, he relaxed. I even ate dessert. That bought me more than anger ever could have. By the time we got home, Daniel had convinced himself the evening had ended in a bruise. Not a fracture. He followed me into the kitchen, loosened his tie, and leaned against the counter with that exhausted, reasonable man posture he used when he wanted to make bad behavior sound like a burden he had been forced to carry. I know tonight wasn't ideal, he said. I took a bottle of sparkling water from the fridge. That's one way to phrase identity fraud. He closed his eyes for half a second. This is exactly what I meant. You take one detail and blow it into a catastrophe. One detail, the filing can be corrected. The filing should never have existed. He pushed off the counter. Nora, can you please stop talking? Like I'm some criminal? He did not realize how dangerous that question was. I'm talking, I said evenly, like someone who found her name on a legal guarantee she never approved. He held my gaze, then changed tactics. I was trying to solve a problem. There it was. The executive summary of every betrayal done by a man who thinks logistics, excuse ethics. Ava's financing window is small, he said. If this deal closes, everybody benefits. It gives her traction, it gives the family credibility, and it gives us a position in something that could become very valuable. Us. Interesting how us appeared only when profit entered the room. And if it fails? I asked. He shrugged too quickly. Then we refinance et restructure. Whatever we need to do. This is how people build things. No. I said, this is how people hide risk. Inside someone else. He lowered his voice. Maybe it was handled badly. But don't pretend. You haven't benefited from the family too. I almost laughed. The family that treated my professional judgment like an inconvenience. Every time it interrupted one of their fantasies. The family that loved my success only when it could be converted into access. I'm going upstairs. I said, so that's it? No, that's tonight. I locked the guest room door, turned off the lamp, and sat on the floor, with my back against the bed, while the house settled around me. At 12:14 a.m., my attorney wrote back, available at 7:30. Don't sign anything. Don't confront further. Preserve all documents. At 12:13. 9:13. The forensic consultant replied, sent me screenshots, file history, device IDs, and any access logs you have. If he touched your accounts or authorizations, we can map it at 12:22. I created a new folder in encrypted storage. I named it Daniel. Then I started feeding the machine screenshots from the filing portal, cloud activity logs, email rules diverting lender correspondence, the digital consent under my name, photos of the sticky note in his desk, images of the guarantee language, metadata from archived messages, a list of dates when Daniel had asked oddly specific questions about my devices, and backup approvals. The work soothed me, not emotionally, structurally. When you stop arguing with betrayal and start organizing it, it loses some of its power to disorient you. At 1:40 inches the morning, I found something else. A forwarded email thread between Daniel and an address connected to Ava's attorney. The original sender was a regional lender. The subject line read, updated guarantor requirements before closing. Daniel had forwarded it to Ava with a message that made me sit absolutely still. If she pushes back, we may need to move sooner. Don't wait until she sees the final language. No ambiguity, no softness, not confusion. He knew exactly what he was doing. I saved the thread and kept going. Betrayal 0A M. The picture was ugly enough to stand on. B3:30. I had made my first real decision. I was not going to warn him. They expected emotional interruption. What they were not expecting was operational patience at chasse. 15:10. I showered, dressed for work, and went downstairs. Daniel was already in the kitchen, making coffee like a man who had slept well, because he believed the worst part of the storm had passed. He looked up when I walked in. There was caution in his face, but also optimism. Good. That meant he still thought I was reachable. I made yours the way you like it, he said. I took the mug. Thanks. You okay? No, but I'm not going to do this before work. That answer gave him exactly what he needed. Restraint without resolution. He nodded slowly. Fair. I sipped the coffee. I want copies of everything Ava sent over. He seemed relieved by the practicality of that request. Of course. And I want the name of the attorney who filed under my authorization. His relief dimmed. Why? So I know exactly what I'm dealing with. He studied me, trying to decide whether this was progress or threat. If you really believe this can be cleaned up, I said, softening my tone just enough, then transparency would be a good place to start. That worked. B8. 10. He sent a full thread. With Ava and the attorney, it gave me names, sequence, and structure. I stepped into my office downtown and shut the door behind me. At Noah 0, I was on a call with my attorney, Marianne Holt. Marianne did not waste language. I walked her through dinner, the guarantee, the prior digital consent, the cloud logs, the email diversion, the sticky note, the forwarded lender thread. She interrupted me only twice. Once to ask, do you have copies? Yes. And once to say, do not use your home Wi-Fi for anything sensitive. Starting now. When I finished, there was a pause. Then, all right, this is no longer a family boundary issue. This is a fraud exposure issue. With marital implications, I assumed so. You assumed correctly. First, we preserve everything. Second, we identify every filing that used your authorization. Third, we notify relevant parties at the right moment, not the emotional moment. The strategic one, that depends, she said. When I asked what that meant, do they think you're still persuadable? Yes. Good. Keep it that way. By 10:30, I had looped in the forensic consultant, Ezra Kane. By noon, he had already found evidence of access overlap between Daniel's tablet and two of my archived account environments at ONU, 15:10. A sommet message that made my pulse go cold. He also attempted login recovery on an old brokerage portal. Didn't get through, but he tried. So the property guarantee wasn't a one-off. He wasn't just solving Ava's problem. He was testing the edges of my entire financial perimeter. Not because he was desperate, because he felt entitled. At 2, Ava texted, Hope you had time to think, we really need signatures by Friday, or the lender will start asking questions. There it was. Need, deadline, pressure. I replied, I'm reviewing everything. I'm not comfortable rushing. She answered immediately. No one's rushing you. We just can't let your anxiety kill the deal. I screenshotted that too. At Trey. Patruzec. Daniel called. How did it go? He asked. After I picked up, she's impatient. Well, yeah. There's a lot in motion. You should have thought about that before someone filed under my name. His silence lasted too long. Then he said the sentence that finally made my marriage feel dead. You're acting like I did this to you. I closed my eyes. People tell the truth most cleanly. When they're trying to defend themselves, Daniel genuinely believed there was a meaningful distinction between using me and doing something to me. No, I said softly. I'm acting like I noticed. I hung up. That evening, there was a new folder on the kitchen island. Cleaner taps, fresh printouts, a page marked with arrows where he clearly wanted my eyes to land. He had decided to manage me harder. I thought it might help if we went through everything together. He said, some of the language had changed. Not enough. Still exposure. Still guarantee mechanics. Still me standing in front of the damage. If Ava's project missed its marks. Then I saw something handwritten on one of the lender memos. Need spouse confidence before Saturday dinner. I looked up. What's Saturday? The question hit him clean across the face. Ava's hosting a small investor dinner. He said, nothing major. That one sentence told me exactly what I needed to know. The original ambush had failed. So now, they were escalating the venue, not just family pressure anymore. Public pressure. Investors, witnesses. A room where hesitation could be framed as instability. I let none of that show on my face. Instead, I nodded once, like a woman reluctantly moving toward reason. That explains the timing, I said. He visibly relaxed. Yes, exactly. It would be much easier if we walked into Saturday aligned. Such an elegant word for coercion. I finally said, then maybe we should stop fighting. His whole body changed. What does that mean? He asked. It means I'm tired of reacting before I understand the full picture. That was true. He mistook it for surrender. If you want me calm by Saturday, I said, I need context. Real context. Who's coming? What they think my role is. What's already been promised. He stared at me, stunned by his own luck. I can do that, he said quickly. And he did. Over the next 48 hours, Daniel handed me almost everything I needed because he thought information was now part of the seduction. The guest list for Saturday, the latest cap table summary, Avas Investor Deck, the names of the people in the room who mattered most, a retired developer, a boutique lender, 2 older couples from Celeste's social circle, a local attorney who apparently liked seeing families build together. I read every line, then I passed it all to Marianne. Her reply came back fast. Perfect. Do not tip them off. Saturday is your pivot point. By Friday afternoon, she had already prepared a notice challenging unauthorized authorization, a preservation demand, and a packet for the lender questioning the validity of every filing tied to my name. Not to send yet. Tohal. Timing. She reminded me. Is leverage. That night, Daniel brought home flowers. White lilies. My least favorite. I thought we could reset. He said. For Saturday? For us. There are lies so ordinary, they almost pass as habit. I smiled back, just enough to keep him warm. Then I stepped into his arms and let him kiss my forehead, because sometimes the fastest way through a trap is to let the trap think it's already closed. On Saturday afternoon, I dressed slowly. Black dress, simple gold hoops, hair back, nothing soft, nothing apologetic. By the time I came downstairs, Daniel was already in his jacket, checking his watch. He looked up and smiled, genuinely relieved. You look incredible, he said. I know, I said. He blinked, then laughed, like I was joking. I picked up my bag. Inside it was my phone, a slim folder of copied documents, a backup battery pack, and enough proof to ruin every version of the story. They had prepared for me. Ready? He asked. I looked at him. The husband, the access point, the translator of demands, the man who had mistaken my calm for consent for far too long. Yes, I said, and together we left for the dinner, where they still believed they were going to close the deal. Ava's investor dinner was being held in a restored carriage house on the east side of town, the kind of place people rent when they want old money atmosphere without old money history. Exposed beams, brick walls, soft amber lighting, waiters in black, moving around with trays of wine, and miniature tartlets. No one actually wanted. The whole room smelled like expensive candles and ambition. When Daniel and I walked in, Ava turned so fast. It was almost involuntary. She had been waiting for visual confirmation. Not that I came calm. The moment she saw me smiling, her whole posture loosened. She crossed the room in a navy silk dress and kissed the air beside my cheek. I'm so glad you made it, she said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. I knew once you had time to think, if you'd understand what this means for all of us. There it was. The preloaded narrative. I took a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray. I wouldn't have missed it. She grinned, taking that as surrender. Across the room, Celeste was already working her side of the floor near the fireplace, speaking to an older couple with the grave confidence of a woman who had built absolutely nothing herself, but had spent decades studying the body language of people who had. Daniel stayed close to me for the first 10 minutes, introducing me to guests, with his hand warm, against the middle of my back. This is my wife. Nora, he said, to a silver-haired developer with cautious eyes. She's the reason any of us understand the legal side of these things. Not Ava's deal, not our family's project, just the competent wife, the stable wife, the useful wife, The developer shook my hand. Good to have a serious mind in the room. I smiled. That depends on what room I'm actually in. He laughed politely. Not understanding. No one did. Not yet. Ava had set up presentation boards near the far wall, renderings of storefronts, occupancy forecasts, a polished summary deck mounted on easels, as if visual confidence could substitute for structural integrity. At the center of the room sat a long black table with place cards, desserts, and a stack of thin leather folders. When I saw the folders, I knew a signing wasn't guaranteed, but it was planned. Daniel followed my eyes and gave me a little nod, like we were sharing the relief of adults who had finally gotten through something difficult. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "Better than I was," I said. Again, he heard what he wanted. Ava clinked a spoon against a glass 20 minutes later and called everyone toward the table. Guests settled in with the low hum of cultivated interest. The retired developer sat 3 seats down from me. Celeste placed herself at the opposite end, like a queen disguised as a hostess. Daniel sat to my left. Ava stood, one hand resting on the back of her chair, ready for her moment. "Thank you all for being here," she began. "This project has been years in the making, and I truly believe we're building something that's not only smart, but lasting." The speech was better than I expected. Still inflated. Still dishonest. But better. She talked about adaptive reuse, neighborhood momentum, boutique commerciale demande intentional growth. She talked about values, legacy, local partnerships, the future. Every third word was some polished version of stability. Then she turned toward me. "And I want to thank the people who believed in this. Before it looked easy," she said, "family matters in projects like this. You can't build anything meaningful without trust." Several heads turned toward Daniel and me. There it was. The room had been prepared, not with details, with impressions. I had not been invited as a guest. I had been staged as reassurance. Ava lifted one of the leather folders from the center of the table and smiled at the room. "For those of you who wanted updated materials, we've included the final operating structure and guarantor framework so everyone can see just how solid this really is." Framework, such a pretty word. Then she set the folder in front of me, not shoved this time. Placed. Presented. Witnessed. The room smiled politely. They thought this was the part where the smart wife nodded, maybe clarified one minor concern, then completed the aesthetic. I looked down at the folder, but didn't open it. Then I looked up at Ava. "Do they know?" I asked. She blinked once. "Know what?" "That you already submitted digital authorization in my name before I ever saw any of this." No one moved. Ava's face changed first. Not much. A quarter inch. The smile stayed, but the heat left it. Daniel's hand went flat on the table. Celeste spoke before either of them could recover. "Nora," she said softly, in the tone people use when they want outsiders to see them handling an unstable relative with grace. "This is not the time." I turned to the older developer with the red tie. Did anyone tell you my authorization was already attached to financing paperwork 3 days before I was shown the guarantee language? He looked from me to Ava, then Daniel. I'm sorry, what? Good? Confusion is honest. Ava gave a short laugh. There's been some internal family miscommunication. No. I said, there has been unauthorized use of my identity in a debt structure. I did not approve. The room changed temperature. Daniel leaned toward me. Voice low and clipped. Don't do this. I looked at him. It's always revealing when a man says, don't do this, instead of that isn't true. I'm not. I said, you already did. I reached into my bag and placed 3 printed pages on the table between us. The digital consent record with the timestamp, the forwarded lender email, Daniel sans Ava, the screenshot of the filing activity tied to the authorization, no theatrics, just paper. Maybe. I said, we should all work from the same version. The retired developer picked up the top page first. Celeste rose halfway out of her chair. Those documents are private. So is my identity? I said. Daniel's voice sharpened. Nora. That was the first time all night. He forgot to sound reasonable. Heads turned toward him. I turned to the room. I want to be very clear. Because I think there's been a useful fiction circulating in here tonight. I did not agree to personally guarantee this project. I was not consulted before my name was inserted into the filing path. And as of this afternoon, counsel representing me formally challenged the validity of any authorization attached to my identity. Ava went pale. Daniel stared at me like someone had swapped out the floor beneath him. Celeste recovered fastest. She always did. This is absurd, she said. Standing now. You're using technical language to create a scene because you don't like the way the family handled a conversation. I looked at her. No, I'm using technical language because technical language is what you tried to bury me in. A silence followed that line. So clean, it felt cut with glass. Then the retired developer cleared his throat and lifted the second page. This email says, if she pushes back, we may need to move sooner. Don't wait until she sees the final language. He looked at Daniel. The whole room did. Daniel opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. It's being taken out of context, he said. How? I asked. He looked at me with something close to hatred, then not loud. Just the cold fury of a man who realizes the person he counted on for cover has become the source of light. It was a family matter, he said. We were trying to solve it internally. The older woman seated near Celeste put down her fork. Using your wife's name? Nobody answered her. Ava was still trying to recover the room. The structure was being finalized. We all knew Nora tends to get overly rigid about legal wording that, I said, might be the first honest sentence you've said all night. She stopped. I took out one more sheet. This one was from Marianne. A formal preservation notice. I slid it toward the center of the table. As of 5 o'clock. Any lender, attorney, or participant moving forward under the assumption of my valid consent Does so after notice of dispute. The retired developer read that too. And this time, he didn't hide the irritation in his face. He turned to Ava. You invited us into a room built on disputed guarantor support? Ava flushed. The support isn't disputed. She's emotional. There it was. The final refuge, not inaccurate, not unauthorized, not deceptive, emotional. I folded my hands in front of me and let the room sit in what she had just done. Then I turned to the boutique lender across the table. If you were told this structure had stable family backing, that statement relied on my name, my income profile, and my implied consent. All three were used without authorization. He asked the only question that mattered. Are you saying the guarantee is dead? No. I said, I'm saying it never lived. That was the line that broke the room. The older couple, Celeste had been charming, near the fireplace, looked suddenly embarrassed. To be there at all? The local attorney was no longer smiling. The retired developer shut the folder and pushed it a full inch away from his plate. Daniel stood up. Bad decision. Standing made him look unstable, which was ironic, given how carefully they had positioned me to carry that role. This is insane. He snapped. Do you understand what you're doing? Yes. I said, no, you don't. You're humiliating all of us because you needed more time to feel included. I looked up at him and saw all at once. The whole design of him, the softness as strategy, the helplessness as camouflage, the marriage's access point, and because I saw it clearly, I no longer needed to react to it emotionally. I'm not humiliating you. I said, I'm removing myself from the version of the story you wrote for me. That shut him up. Then the retired developer stood, gathered the papers, and set them back down. I don't invest in confusion, he said, and I definitely don't invest in disputed guarantees. The lender nodded once. Same. Another couple murmured something about needing to rethink timing. The attorney at the far end asked Ava, in a tone stripped of all warmth, whether her filing counsel had independently verified spousal authorization. Ava's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Celeste remained standing, one hand braced against the tablecloth, her face almost impressively still. She could hold her expression half a beat longer than other people, while a room turned against her. But rooms always turn. Daniel looked around like he was waiting for someone to restore the script. No one did. He turned back to me. Quieter now. What do you want? There it was. The question men ask when morality fails and transaction is all they have left. I picked up my glass and took one small sip of water. Then I answered him, in the calmest voice I had used all night. What I want is the first thing you should have given me. I said, my name back. I stood, slid my chair in, and took the folder from in front of me. Then I looked once around the room. At the guests, the candles, the polished boards, the family who had mistaken my silence for access, and I smiled. I think, I said, you all have enough information now? No one stopped me. When I walked out, That was the most satisfying part. Not applause, not collapse, just the complete, unmistakable shift that happens when a room finally understands who has been lying. By the time I stepped into the night air, the version of the evening they had planned was already dead. And for the first time since Ava slid that folder across the dinner table, I could feel something clean opening up inside me. Not revenge, just space. The kind people only get when they stop negotiating with the trap and finally spring it on purpose. Daniel came home after the investor dinner a little after midnight. I was in the living room with one lamp on, is still wearing the same black dress. Barefoot now. My phone face down on the coffee table beside a legal pad, covered in names, dates, and next steps. He stood in the doorway for a second, like he wasn't entirely sure whose house he was walking into. That was new. Normally, Daniel entered rooms like they would adapt to him. Not anymore. He loosened his tie with one hand and shut the door behind him. "You embarrassed me," he said. Not "you were right." Not "we need to fix this." Just the injury to him. I looked up from the legal pad. "That's what you came home with?" His mouth tightened. "You blindsided everyone." I set the pen down. "You forged the conditions for it?" "Nothing was forged." "That's not the argument. You want to make..." That stopped him. For the first time since this started, he looked tired in a real way. Cornered, tired. He glanced at the folder on the coffee table. Then back at me. "What did your attorney tell you?" "That depends. Do you want the short version or the version you should have thought about before using my name?" He dragged a hand over his face. "Nora, I know this looks bad." "It is bad. I was trying to help Ava close the window. You were trying to use my credibility as collateral." He looked away. That, more than anything, told me the truth had finally outrun his ability to arrange it. I stood up. He straightened a little, maybe thinking movement meant volatility. It didn't. I just didn't want to keep discussing the corpse of my marriage from a couch I had paid for. "I want your tablet," I said. He blinked. "What? Your tablet? And your laptop?" Now. His posture changed immediately. Defensive, angry, exposed. "You can't just demand my devices. Actually, in this house, tonight, I can demand anything I want. The only question is whether I need to involve additional people to get it." "You think you can threaten me?" I said, "You have spent 4 years mistaking my self-control for a lack of options." We stared at each other, across the room. Then, because men like Daniel are always bravest inside assumptions, he made the mistake I had been waiting for. He said, "You won't go that far." Wrong. I picked up my phone and unlocked it. "Mariana?" That got him moving. "Wait." I said nothing. He stood there for another beat, then turned and walked upstairs. When he came back down, he had the tablet under one arm and the laptop in his hand. He set them on the coffee table, harder than necessary. "Happy?" "No." I said, but I'm closer. He laughed once. Short, ugly, humorless. You really are enjoying this. People like Daniel always call it enjoyment. When the person they harmed stops performing softness for their comfort, go to bed. I said, in my house? I let the silence answer that for him. Then I said, very evenly, you should be careful with possessives right now. He slept in the guest room that night. By 8 the next morning, Ezra had both devices. By noon, Marianne had drafted a formal separation notice, a demand concerning unauthorized identity use, and a letter to the lender disputing every filing tied to my name. She also had a private investigator pulling public records on Ava's LLC and everyone attached to the financing path. By Monday afternoon, the first calls started. The lender wanted clarification. Ava's attorney wanted to de-escalate confusion. Celeste left a voicemail, so controlled. It was almost elegant. Nora, I think we all understand emotions ran high this weekend. I would strongly encourage you not to let pride create permanent damage. Pride, that family had an extraordinary talent for renaming their own behavior in other people. I sent the voicemail to Marianne and blocked Celeste's number. Daniel lasted 3 more days in the house before Marianne advised me to formalize occupancy boundaries. He argued at first. Of course he did. He said I was overreacting. He said marriage was complicated. He said I was letting outside professionals poison something private. He said if I pushed this publicly, I would humiliate him in ways that couldn't be repaired. That part was true. On Thursday, he moved into a furnished rental, paid for with what was left, of his business account. The house got quieter after that. Not instantly better. Quiet and better are not the same thing. But the air changed. The rooms stopped feeling observed. I stopped hearing the front door and wondering whether a demand was about to walk through it, wearing concern. A week later, Ezra gave me what he called enough to stop calling this suspicious and start calling it deliberate. He had mapped access attempts across multiple devices, backup approvals, filtered email pathways, and metadata overlaps, linking Daniel's tablet to the authorization trail around Ava's financing packet. Not enough for some dramatic criminal prosecution, Marianne warned, but more than enough for civil leverage, lender challenge, and absolute marital clarity. That was all I needed. The lender froze the file, pending investigation. The retired developer formally withdrew. The boutique lender did the same. 2 smaller investors followed within 48 hours. Without my name stabilizing the structure, Ava's project stopped looking visionary and started looking exactly what it was. Undercapitalized optimism in expensive shoes. By the second week, she was calling from unknown numbers. I didn't answer. She emailed instead. At first, she tried outrage. You've destroyed months of work over a misunderstanding. Then wounded dignity. I genuinely thought Daniel had worked this out with you. Then desperation. If this deal collapses, a lot of people are going to get hurt. That one almost impressed me. She still believed the main injustice here was that consequences had arrived in the wrong direction. Celeste took longer to crack. But once the investor dinner started moving through her social orbit, in the edited, poisonous way stories do, she became almost frantic. I heard about it from a woman on the auxiliary board who called under the pretense of checking on me and spent 12 careful minutes trying to learn whether the business confusion was really as serious as people were saying. Apparently, the phrase making the rounds was unauthorized family exposure. I liked that it sounded expensive. A month later, Daniel asked to meet public place, neutral tone. He wanted to talk like adults. So I met him at a hotel bar downtown at 4 p.m, the hour best suited for conversations nobody should be proud of. He looked worse. Not ruined, just diminished. He ordered bourbon. I ordered tea. For a full minute, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "I never thought you'd go this far." I looked at him across the polished wood. "That was your problem." He rubbed his thumb against the side of the glass. "I made mistakes. Mistakes are usually singular." He gave me a tired look. "You always do that." "Do what?" "Turn everything into exact language." I held his gaze because exact language is where people like you hide. He looked down. There was no real defense left after that. He asked whether I would consider handling the separation quietly. No formal findings, no broader dispute, no unnecessary reputational damage. Even at the end, he was still negotiating for atmosphere. "I am handling it quietly." I said, "You should be grateful. I prefer paperwork to performance." He flinched. Then he said something I knew he believed would move me. "I did love you." There are sentences that arrive years too late and still expect a response. "You also used me." I said, "And I'm done being asked to grade those two things on a curve." That was the last time I saw him alone. The divorce itself took less time than people expected and more energy than they understood. There was no screaming courtroom showdown. Real endings are usually administrative signatures, disclosures, valuation, occupancy dates, account separations, boxes. Always boxes. I changed locks, changed passwords, changed emergency contacts on every system that mattered. I had the security company update the garage code and entry records. Then I took one full Saturday and walked room to room through the house, deciding what still felt like mine and what had only felt tolerable because I was lonely inside it. The guest room stayed, the kitchen stayed, the dining room chairs went. So did the framed wedding picture from the hallway and the silver ice bucket Celeste had given us our first Christmas. Some objects carry too much choreography. By early spring, Ava's project was dead. Not paused. Not delayed. Dead. Without the guarantee, the lender exited. Without the lender, the secondary money disappeared. Without outside money, the family-backed redevelopment opportunity collapsed under the weight of what it had always actually been. A half-built fantasy, depending on my name, to look structurally sound. Ava tried one final message. I hope ruining all of this was worth it. I read it while standing in my kitchen with sunlight across the counter and coffee cooling beside my hand, then I blocked her too. A few weeks after the divorce closed, I got a promotion. Not because of any poetic justice. Because I was good at my job, had always been good at my job, and had managed to navigate a personal implosion without letting sloppiness touch my work. My new office had taller windows, better light, a door that shut with real weight. On my first morning there, I stood inside that office before anyone else arrived and set one box on the credenza by the window. Nothing dramatic inside it. A framed photograph of a coastline from a trip I took alone years ago. A pen I liked. A small brass clock. Silence. That evening, I went home to a house that no longer felt like a negotiation and opened every window in the living room. The air moved through slowly. Warm. Clean. My phone buzzed once on the coffee table from an unknown number. I let it ring itself quiet. Then I carried a glass of wine out to the back steps and sat there until the sky turned dark blue and the neighborhood settled into evening around me. No one needed anything. No one was waiting to corner me into understanding. No one was translating theft into family language and asking me to admire the packaging. It's strange. The things that feel luxurious after a bad marriage. Not jewelry. Not flowers. Not apologies too late to matter. Space. Locks that work. Documents with your real name. Attached to your real choices. A night with no agenda. Hidden inside it. I thought, for a moment, about the version of me who had sat at that first dinner table and still believed discomfort could be managed if she stayed calm enough, useful enough, gracious enough. She had not been weak, just outnumbered, and still assuming everyone else was operating in good faith. That was the part I had to bury, not kindness, not hope, just the instinct to keep translating other people's greed into something more flattering. My phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. This time, a text. You didn't have to destroy the family. To make your point, no name. Didn't matter. I looked at the screen for a long second, then typed back, the only answer worth giving. There was no family there to destroy. I sent it, blocked the number, and set the phone face down beside me. The night stayed quiet. For the first time in a very long time. Quiet didn't feel like tension waiting for its next shape. It felt earned.